much.
Thank you. Okay, welcome, Maureen. We're back live. We're on page 703, and we have Maureen Hebert from Vermont Technical College.
Fabulous.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So Maureen Hebert, Associate Dean of Continuing Education and Workforce Development at Vermont Tech. Thank you for inviting me today. We serve over 3,200 Vermonters across the state in various programs from healthcare to plumbing and electrical, other apprenticeship programs in manufacturing. We also offer the Career and Tech Ed Teacher Licensure Program. So a wide variety of industry sectors are served by our work. More recently, we started a fiber broadband installer program and are working with Burlington Tech Center to offer an airframe aviation maintenance program. And that was approved by Vermont Department of Labor to become an apprenticeship program. So we really appreciate the funding and support that you're providing for trades-based programs. As you may know, we've been running the electrical and plumbing program for many, many years now. And graduation is actually coming in May. We're very excited. We have about 132 students finishing out that program.
Tell us, say, what was the most recent one that was approved by the Department of Labor as an apprenticeship program? Could you tell us what that process means and what the value of being certified as an apprenticeship program? Or could you not do it if you weren't certified? How does that work?
Certainly. So a registered apprenticeship program comes with a credential that's recognized nationally beyond just the programming that's in the content. So it adds an extra value that is recognized across the other states. We are very much a partner with Vermont Department of Labor, making sure that we work with employers to provide the skills necessary to meet their needs as employers. And the competencies that are recognized nationally. Apprenticeship is a really kind of a delivery model that's a learn and earn model. So employers will hire an individual, support them through the training, and then increase their wages as they complete the program. So it's a wage progression. It's a very good recruitment tool because it's low risk to the students because they're employed. And many of our students across Vermont Tech and many in the VSC really can't go to school and kind of quit their day job because they're adult learners, have families, other expenses. So to have that support from the employer to complete a program, have a recognized credential at the end of that program is really important. And it's a very good retention tool nationally across the various states. Apprenticeship students that have completed a program typically have about 90% retention. So that they really value the support of their employer to be able to complete the program. And we've been expanding the number of apprenticeship programs that we have available in other sectors. So plumbing and electrical being the largest, we have about 700 students statewide currently enrolled in that program. But we also have an advanced manufacturing program, the LPN program I mentioned at Central Vermont Medical Center, and the program that we're...
How many are in the advanced manufacturing program?
Currently, we have about 100 students in that program.
Yeah, that's
and it's offered in a couple different places, Springfield being one of the locations.
So is the apprenticeship program primarily a clinical add-on where the main function is the employment, or is it mostly schooling with some clinical hours? How does that work?
So there's a related instruction component where students are participating in the coursework, and it's usually delivered flexibly, so in the evenings or weekends, so that people can continue to work as they progress through the program. And then there's an on-the-job training component, which we partner with the employers to be able to deliver that piece. So they mentor their employee to help them kind of learn about their particular business. So the number of hours for the on-the-job piece can vary depending by the program. It's about 8,000 hours in plumbing and electrical.
So what is UTC's role in the apprenticeship program?
So we offer the related instruction for most of the programs, well, all of the programs. The on-the-job training piece, we work with and support the employers to help them upskill internally. So for example, the LPN program, we actually have a clinical support person that works with the students for the on-the-job piece, so it's not a burden on the employer. And that helps support those students not only through their related instruction, but they can tie the learning together to the on-the-job training piece.
That's sort of like our preceptor thing. I mean, quite honestly, that's clinical help, sort of mentoring the LPNs on the job.
Exactly. It's a great model, and it fits very well with other professions as well. So like manufacturing, which is a very technical skill. So having that expert and that mentor or that master electrician supporting the individual is really important.
It's great, but Maureen, I'm going to ask you a very specific question. How much more do you compensate those mentors who are the clinical mentors for those LPN students, and who pays for that?
So in the scenario of the regular degree program, I can't speak to that. For the LPN apprenticeship program that we're offering at Central Vermont Medical Center, the Central Vermont Medical Center has been covering the cost for that piece.
To go to your point, the hospital is paying for that because the hospital benefits from it.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously the employee.
But the preceptor we talked about yesterday with, I forget the woman's first name, Ms. Fox or Dr.
Lisa Fox.
Oh, Lisa, yes.
That sounds very different than an apprenticeship program. It sounds like the apprenticeship program, the preceptor program, you're sort of walking around with a nurse and observing what they're doing. In an apprenticeship program, you're actually an employee of the employer working, and you're learning skills as you go, and you may get some training, but you're a valued employee while you're there. It's very different.
Absolutely, but they're asking these current LPNs to be clinical mentors for these people. That's not dissimilar. They're not employed by the.
Well, it's part of the degree program too, but correct. Apprentices are employed, and the point behind the apprenticeship program for CVMC in particular is they're upskilling their internal workforce. So a lot of the students that are in and enrolled in that program are LNAs, maybe have come from their facilities or other departments, and they wanted to enter the field of nursing. So they're employed, and it's a really solid recruitment tool for CVMC as well, because they can hire people into the program knowing that they'll become LPNs after that 1 year. So, and the clinical piece is built into the degree program as well. What we're using those hours for is also to support them through their on-the-job training. And they will continue on to have a preceptor once they complete the apprenticeship program. So that is additional support for them.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in last year's workforce bill, one of the things that we contributed and found important was the work of apprenticeships and internships, and we set aside a lump sum of money. I think it was a couple $1 million for these programs. And I think I'm hearing that it hasn't all been spent. Do you know anything about this at all?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that.
We have to track that down, because it's really frustrating that in these times that giving flexible money, because we felt like interns and apprenticeships were so good way to bring people along in the workforce, and yet somehow the money's been boxed up or the program hasn't been started up.
That was in, I believe, wasn't that in the nursing forgivable loan incentive program? That money.
I'll have to go back to last year's bill. I remember
don't think it's.
that section being a subject of dispute at the end.
Well, I do know the Vermont Department of Labor did receive some funding for apprenticeship expansion. Is that what you're referring to?
Maybe that's it.
That could be it, right? Yeah.
Okay. Because they have been really supportive of new programs. For example, the fiber optic broadband installer program. as well as the aviation airframe maintenance program. As you may know, we're part of sort of an aviation corridor from Canada to Connecticut. So there's a lot of opportunity and need for that particular profession and it's a program we don't currently have in Vermont. So that's been very exciting to be able to partner with Burlington Tech Center to offer both high school students and adults the opportunity to get into that career.
So how is the plumbers union UA 690 and IBW, are they competition to Vermont Technical College for apprenticeship programs? Because they have their own apprenticeship programs.
Well, they actually send their students to our program. So they participate in the related instruction that we offer. Some of their students do go to another program out of state, but I think the vast majority of them come to our program. So we're not in competition, we're complementary.
So they have that joint training center off Williston Road there where their offices are. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, they do. So for a plumber or an electrician, you have to get continuing education after you complete your licensure if you're a journeyman or a master's. And I believe they offer that. We also have offered that within electrical because there's just so many people that are not in a union that need that training as well. But we're not necessarily in competition. There's just so much need out there. And again, as I mentioned, we have about 700 students statewide. So our capacity to deliver around the state has increased exponentially over the years. And this particular fall was the largest class that we've had in many years. So that was pretty exciting.
In plumbing and electrical.
Yes.
Oh, there's been more people at home Zooming for plumbing problems.
So just so I understand this a little better, if you have a plumbing apprenticeship, you're working for a plumbing company, you have to do related instruction. You get the related instruction from you. Who pays for the related instruction? The employer or some of these state programs that we put money into last year? Or do they pay for it out of pocket?
So the participants, if they are a registered apprentice, their employer pays for the annual fee, which is $1,000 over 4 years, so $4,000 total. Any books or exam fees, that usually is paid for by the apprentice. In some cases, employers will pay for books, but for the most part, that is a burden that the apprentice has to take on. And what we've been able to do over this past year, if any students need a laptop in order to be successful in the course, we have loaners that we have available. In most cases, students are able to get VSAC funding if they need additional expenses covered. But first year students aren't necessarily required to have an employer yet. It's sort of a apprentice opportunity. They typically are hired before they complete their year. But in that case, we were able to get some funding through the McClure Foundation this past year through their Best Bets program to offset their tuition costs. And both programs, electrical and plumbing, they only meet 2 nights a week from November to May. So it's a very flexible program for adult learners that are working. We also have a partnership with some of the tech centers around the state where high school students can complete their first year while they're in the tech center. And in some cases, that's covered either through flexible funding or through the Department of Labor. So if a tech center has a need, they approach the Department of Labor and they can get funding that way.
But Maureen, isn't that also dual enrollment? I mean,
no, that particular fund isn't dual enrollment because it's not a credit bearing course. Yes, we're trying to make it credit bearing. It is in the process.
And I believe we funded last year, the DOL we put money aside for books and extra costs for these specific students. Don't you remember we had money? I believe it was last year for this exact.
We focused on some flexible money for.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always wondered, there used to be like a line item, I don't know if there is anymore, for apprenticeship training in the budget at DOL. And I'm trying to understand what they use that money for. Maybe it's for the books or maybe certifying the program, some administrative costs that they have. But there used to
Yeah,
be
I
a
believe it's some administrative costs because there is with 700 students, you're tracking on the job hours. There's a lot of paperwork to be able to be a registered apprentice and employer paperwork that we require or the Department of Labor requires.
so,
Um, when you, I'm particularly sort of interested in the nursing section, and I know we talked to Ms. Fox yesterday. I wonder, for you, anything where there's a forgivable loan, does that price tag still scare away your students who might have to support a family, be low income? And then there's very specific buckets, and I just wonder if you feel like those are the buckets that most urgently need to be filled to support and grow the workforce, the nursing workforce.
Well, I can speak to the critical occupation funding that we received last year, and thank you for that. That made a huge impact, not only on our enrollment, but the ability for students to complete the program. That was a really big initiative that I think was very, very successful. We also were able to, Lisa was able to develop a long-term care LPN program, which is very exciting. And hopefully that's going to be starting soon. And they're looking at serving also home health agencies. So right now we have so many hospitals that are hiring traveling nurses from out of state, and the cost for them, it just is exorbitant. So we want to be able to grow our own nursing workforce in the state and continue to grow that. And I think there's a lot of interest in nursing and healthcare generally. We often have a wait list for many of our programs. And like I said, the program is dispersed around the state, so it's very accessible. So the more opportunities that we can have to expand that program, the better. I do work with several hospitals, including CVMC that I mentioned, that are trying to be creative and support internal employees to be able to take that advantage of those resources as well. So giving them flex schedules, recognizing that they still do have to work while they go through the program. But the LPN program has a very high NCLEX pass rate. It's an excellent program. Nationally, it's ranked really high in terms of success. So I think the more we can to support that program, the better.
Well, Maureen, on that, oh gosh, my big question, Lisa, that says that we have about 1,000 nurses coming through. Would you say that your biggest barrier is the faculty to not having more students in that at the moment?
Well, it definitely is an issue, and it's not just nursing. It is a challenge when you have a workforce that basically is being recruited for the sector that they're trained in. So we have a lot of nursing faculty that can make more money working within healthcare rather than teaching. And that is a difficult scenario. So it is hard to recruit faculty, not only in nursing, but manufacturing and other areas.
So it's not just a nursing challenge, the faculty.
Yeah. We have to be able to have a competitive wage because it's a difficult job teaching, and to not value their expertise with a salary that kind of matches is.
Do you have any thoughts? Because sadly, our own Vermont nurses are exacerbating our traveling nurse problem by becoming traveling nurses themselves.
Mm-hmm.
In this bill, would you put any limitations on people who receive these benefits that are in this bill from being able to be traveling nurses? Because that is exact that I know we have our own nurses that are adding to the problem.
Yeah, and I know a few of them that have become traveling nurses. That's a difficult question for me because I know individuals need to find the job or the structure for their work life that works for them. But I think it wouldn't be a difficult thing to require that they stay in Vermont for a period of time to
But we
work
have traveling nurses who get paid as traveling nurses within Vermont, which
within
is
Vermont.
another
Yeah.
problem. I don't know
Yeah.
why we allow that. But-
Yeah, and I really can't speak to that other than I do think it is an issue.
Maureen, who would we talk to that oversees, makes that decision? Is that the nursing board that would make that decision that a Vermont nurse could be a traveler within the Vermont borders?
I don't know if they have oversight over that because basically they're working for an employer and the employer is placing them where needed. So I don't think there's anyone that in particular oversees that. It could be a question for the Secretary of State's office too, because they do licensing. But I think that's the gap is nobody really is sort of overseeing that issue.
Well, I don't want our public money going to solve a problem that is also feeding the problem.
I agree. And it's a national issue for sure.
But it's a Vermont dollar. Right now, we're following Vermont dollars, and we've tried to work to make sure public money, goes to sustain affordable housing. We want to make sure also with this money that's going into nursing that we're not just feeding the problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Nurses, yeah, well, take advantage of this. You need to actually not be a traveling nurse. You have to. I think that's a problem here that we need to make sure we.
So just going back to the critical occupation money that you said helped a lot. That was in terms of basically paid for tuition for a lot of trades that, and including apprenticeships where people the first year they may have to go into their own pocket. So that was
it was for healthcare, electrical and plumbing, and I believe childcare programs. We would love to see it expand to manufacturing. I think any of the engineering professions are much needed right now. We're hearing that daily from employers, including civil engineering. VTrans really needs more staff, more skilled, trained staff, because they're going to be doing some big infrastructure work over the next few years. So I'd love to see that expanded to that area if possible.
Is that in this bill at all?
I believe so. Not in this trades 7. I guess I can't speak to that. I'd have to look a little further, but it was something that we've been talking about in this iteration. I'm not sure if it's still there. Catherine Lavasser would probably be able to speak to that better than I.
What is it again, Maureen?
The critical occupation.
The critical occupation.
Oh, that is not in this bill. I believe it's in the big bill.
Yes, that's correct.
I'd have to double check, but.
So at the very least, you think that the program has been continued, correct? But you're looking for an expansion to other sectors, right?
And not to say that healthcare, electrical, plumbing, and childcare are not needed, absolutely. But I think their manufacturing is a big area that we need to look at.
So is that essentially the critical occupation program? Is that essentially free college tuition?
It is last funding dollars. So if a student applies for a degree program and say they qualify for, they're Pell eligible or can get some federal aid, then this would cover any gaps that they had in funding.
This is the gap filler.
But there's no means testing of the program, right? You could be a wealthy individual and still qualify for gap funding.
I don't think so.
No, our financial aid office looks at individuals. If they can pay a certain amount, that is included in their package. And then any other gaps that they might have, any other eligibility like scholarships and such. But if you can pay and can afford the particular program, this funding wouldn't kick in, is my understanding.
Okay, let's move to the trades because we need to move along. So which section would you refer us to specifically that's in your bill?
Well, it was, I believe, section 14 that we were looking at. We had been very interested in supporting programs that are beyond electrical and plumbing. We have programs in HVAC, as I mentioned, civil engineering. These aren't necessarily the kind of traditional trades that we think of electrical and plumbing, but anything we can do to support those fields would be wonderful. And all of those programs really map to our degree programs as well. So it's not an if or situation where a student can only do electrical and plumbing. They can actually jump into other programs as well and continue to advance their career. We also have programming within the sustainable energy sector, including solar installer, air quality, BPI training, which is Building Performance Institute.
Looking at page 24 and 25 of the bill, so are these in trades beyond the ones that are eligible for gap filling under the critical occupation funding from last year? How does this work?
Well, so this is the Vermont Trades Scholarship Program, which would, I believe, be administered by VSAC. Will cover licensing fees, exam fees, and tuition payments. That's how it's written within the bill. So ideally, we'd be able to expand sort of the opportunities within the sector for students. Vermont Tech has a wide variety of programs that provide industry recognized credentials, most of which are not in a degree program. They're a separate credential that allows someone to start working in that field immediately. And it's a skill and competency-based program that is recognized by a third-party provider and can support that individual to get into the field and then can continue to advance. So it wasn't necessarily identified which kind of areas would be funded by this program. I'm assuming that VSAC will be working on that with the various educational programs in the state.
So let me just follow up and then Senator Brock and Senator Clarkson. So I don't know who to ask this of, but I find myself asking it a lot of points in this bill, all the different funding streams. Almost like a chart with a man or a woman at the top, and they're going into a trade. Where do they get their money to go to Vermont state colleges? We just got finished saying that, I don't know if it's VSAC or whatever your financial people will look and see whether they're eligible for Pell Grants, whether they have their own money, and then there's this gap filling program for through career opportunities, whatever the terminology is.
Is that 802 opportunity?
Critical occupations.
Right.
So it seems to me that certain students already have every need already met. Now we're putting another program in. What gap is this filling?
So most of the students that are participating in the trades type program are not necessarily eligible for financial aid because they're taking a particular industry recognized credential that's a short-term credential that gets them into that particular field. For example, fiber broadband installer training, that is a short-term training that gets the student prepared to work in the field immediately after they complete that program. It's also an industry recognized credential that's supported nationally and meets the competencies of that particular field. So it's getting people from no skills, upskilling them so they can start to work within the sector. And that doesn't necessarily, they don't have access to financial aid for those types of programs. They may have some money to support it themselves. In some cases, are not hired by an employer. They're just trying to get into that field. So this would fill that gap. Plus, each of our programs, like I mentioned, electrical and plumbing, has a licensing exam that the students have to take after they complete the program. And that funding is, they have to support that themselves. It's not usually something the employer covers. So oftentimes you'll have to take the electrical exam more than once. So there's a pretty high fee every time you have to take it. So it could be burdensome on these individuals to complete that program. And you need that license to work in that field.
We can I've gotten a little confused on the language here, because it does say the way it was presented to us, it was mostly for licensing fees and exams, but then it throws in tuition payments, which it seemed could swallow the whole program in terms of what the primary focus of this. Is it your understanding this is supposed to be for the loose ends, or it is a hardcore funding for education of the trades that don't necessarily qualify for academic programs?
The second is my understanding, because if you think about our current situation where we have a high graduation rate for high schools and a low rate for continuing on to anything post-secondary, and I don't mean just a baccalaureate program, but any kind of training after you complete, and how many jobs actually need some sort of upskill or training to be able to do that job. For fiber broadband installer, it's not really easy to learn that on the job because there are so many pieces that are involved. The program that I just offered, we literally had a lab of probably 20 different boxes full of tools and equipment to help support the learning and help them get skilled in that particular field. So there's much involved. And oftentimes those individuals, I feel that don't continue on to post-secondary are the people that we could be moving into the areas of our state economy that could be most successful and most important. And we want to be able to support them. And they typically are first generation. They don't have the funding or they're concerned about the risk of jumping into a program self-paying for that program, or in some cases, they just can't afford the books. They can't afford, the whole process of doing the training. If they're adults supporting a family, it's really difficult to do that work. So.
I do have a question, and it's regarding the definition of a trade and also the type of program a person could be enrolled in to qualify under section B1, that specific definition. And I wonder if that definition is sufficient or if it is too narrow. In other words, whether or not it should be broadened.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at that now, and it seems to me it covers most of the areas. It doesn't identify the particular programs. The state has through a variety of groups and cross-functional organizations did define what they thought was an industry recognized credential or a credential of value. So I do think that is recognized both.
That defined, is it defined somewhere?
Yes, the Vermont Department of Labor pulled a group together that looked at what an industry credential or a credential of value should look like for the state. I can send you that language, but also Sarah Buxton would have that too.
Yeah. Well, for example, we talk about broadband as something that would be applicable, and I'm not sure whether that would fall under mechanical, industrial, or medical trade or building trade.
That's a good question. I think of it more as infrastructure.
If we talk about, for example, the last part, clean energy, energy efficiency, weatherization, or clean transportation, automobile mechanics, for example, is that a trade?
So that would probably fit under clean transportation.
It isn't clean, at least in terms of
Yeah,
the definition that we are talking about today. You've got millions of automobiles that are not, quote, clean, unquote, and won't be for 25 years. Are we including the training of people who service that in this definition as qualified?
That does narrow it. We do offer electrical vehicle auto repair at our program. That would fit under clean transportation, but I see what you're saying. That is very much narrowing that sector. We do still use a lot of diesel engines across the state and region, so that needs to be considered as well.
So yeah, perhaps we should just think about a
We
modification.
might want to put the word include here.
Yeah,
and just
including,
say go beyond.
Because- I think we do need including but not limited to, because we've heard, and I assume what we're also hearing from you, Maureen, is that this listing is a little too confining, that there are pharmacy techs, there are robotics, there's iCloud, there's high-tech stuff,
And then all the things we haven't thought of.
and
once
all
we
the
finish
things
this
that
bill.
either haven't been invented yet, or we haven't thought of. So I think we need to do including too, but not limited. Yeah,
Yeah, and robotics and industrial would actually fit under mechanical and industrial, but I really do think that's a good point, because there are new industries that are popping up almost, daily, particularly in response to COVID, and trying to be able to be more flexible. For example, infrastructure, I think, would be important to include there.
yes.
So Maureen, did you testify in the House on this bill?
I did. It was quite a while ago and probably early stages, but I did.
So do you know the genesis of this section? What agency or group brought it forward, or the administration brought it forward? Do you know where it came from? Come from BTC or from?
This particular section, I imagine it's a combination of testimony from various groups, but I don't know what the particular entity was that wrote this section.
Do you view this section as a base builder, that this is an ongoing program, or is this $3 million just for 1 year?
Well, ideally, I think we'd like to be able to support any of these sectors as long as we can, because these are really the economic drivers in the state, if you really think about it. And we've discovered that through COVID, that these are really critical things. The other thing that's missing here is agriculture and working lands. But we really do recognize that we do need plumbers, we do need electricians, we need to continue to grow our manufacturing sector. Obviously, we want to be more energy efficient, but something like fiber broadband impacts every industry in the state, and it impacts our ability to recruit people from out of state to come to Vermont to work. If they can't have access to high-speed internet, it's hard to do their jobs, do their studies, have their families do their studies. There's a variety of reasons to include that.
We used to have a program that paid for that.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go to meat cutters?
Sure. I'm happy to do that.
We'll do that. Is it your understanding that our critical occupation grants is the type is the same as 802 opportunity grants? Is that critical occupation grants that are administered by VSAC?
My understanding is the 802 grant is just for CCV, and it's administered through VSAC, and it provides tuition for CCV students.
So it's not the critical occupation, because I thought I found.
No, that's a different funding source. Critical occupations supported plumbing, electrical, healthcare, and I believe childcare.
But only at CCV?
No,
Well, plumbing and electrical is Vermont
802 is
Tech.
open at CCV.
802 is
Yes.
the CCD money you heard about, where they raised the income eligibility for families from 50 to 75. And it was so successful. I mean, we had so many people. So it sounds like we need to find in the budget. Maybe I can just email Jane and ask her.
No, I have that. Don't do it in the papers right here.
Yeah, I can't find it.
It's on the second chart. 802.
I've got 802, but I don't,
Oh, you're talking
what
about-
we're missing is this, the critical occupations. Where is it and how much? This is the CC.
Which section is the meat cutters? Section one.
Section, I think it begins with the top. The best cut of meat is the first. After all the,
Maureen, could you help us?
I believe it is the first section, section 2, 387,000 to Vermont Tech to develop a skilled
that's
meat
the first
cutter.
substantive section, the first is all. section 2 is page 2. No, that's CTE funding and governance
Page
funding.
one.
Page one, so
Page 1, A2, 387,000.
It's just it's not a whole section on its own. Got it.
No, it's just a one line.
So
So did you lobby for this in the House?
So this program was identified as a need statewide. We have about 3,600 livestock and 256 poultry producers, but we have very few processing facilities. And Vermont really is known for its working lands, and we need to be able to kind of grow that program. It's every time we run these classes, they're full and have a wait list. We've identified through various grocery store chains, including Shaw's, that they are really struggling finding skilled workers within the sector, but they pay very well. So it is a real opportunity. Plus, there's smaller producers that are looking to expand their market beyond Vermont. I think in general, because of COVID, we've seen a supply chain reduction in terms of meat nationally being distributed. So this would allow Vermont to be sort of a hub in the New England region, providing this training.
And our understanding was total cost for this program is about just under $1 million, about 937,000. This is just the gap that needs to be funded.
Correct.
Would you be kind enough to give us the numbers of meat producers again?
So there are 3,600 livestock producers and 256 poultry producers. There are additionally some of the those facilities are trying to diversify into to pig and other meat animals. So that's a growing area.
It is definitely growing, and this does not include the random people who do other things and also have chickens that they then come and have 100, slaughtered on farm. So the question I have for you is, how many people do we run through the meat cutting program a year?
So we've had anywhere from 50 to 100 people, but we have limitations because it's such a hands-on training. Each of the programs we have to limit the size to maybe 10 students per because of our limitations on our facilities. So this will allow us to expand our facilities and offer the training more frequently across the different types of production.
How long a program is it?
So we actually have a few different programs that are anywhere from 1 week to a 3-day training. We're looking at developing longer term trainings that are more specialized, as well as an apprenticeship program. There used to be an apprenticeship program in the state many, many years ago, but the capacity for that facility to offer it was limited. So hoping to look at that as well. We partnered with SUNY Skill that has a very successful program.
They have a fabulous program.
It's amazing. And they really think that there's an opportunity in Vermont to do something slightly different, but still sort of highlight the best of Vermont. The bottleneck really is that production facility right now. So if you're a farm that's looking to diversify, it's very difficult for you to get your meat produced and then to market because there is a bottleneck.
And we're facing this problem our ag committee is facing, which is the feds are sort of landing on us on our ability to do on-farm slaughter, which is really a real, that will create huge barriers, which are big problems.
So this one sentence on meat cutting says to develop a skilled meat cutter training and apprenticeship facility. So is this a capital investment?
So yes, it will be on the Randolph campus. So that right now we're using a facility that's based in Waitsfield that has limited space, limited production, and limited availability. So we want to be able to bring it to Randolph so we can expand that. We also want the ability to be able to partner with the CTE centers across the state and be a hub for them to be able to explore this particular profession. So, food entrepreneurship is something that we're really focused on.
This is definitely a 3-year commitment to get almost $1 million towards this facility, because we don't want to just put $300,000, $387,000 in it just to have a foundation, right?
Well, yes,
They have a lot of this money. This is just the gap to finish it.
correct. Yes, we had some additional funding from the USDA, and we are hoping to be able to fill that gap with this funding.
With this money, they'll be able to finish and up and run.
Good. Are there other sections in the bill that you'd like to highlight? Because we do need to move on.
Oh, no, I think that was the majority of what I wanted to talk about today, and I really appreciate your time and your support. This is really critical for Vermont and Vermonters, and I sincerely appreciate that work.
Being here.
Thank you, Maureen. It's always good to see you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Take care.
Able to stay? Jeremy?
You didn't respond yet.
Okay, Fred, are you able to stick around till 11?
Yes.
Thank you very much, because Jill has a hard stop. So we'll take Jill right now. She said she's going to be quick. So good morning, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? It's nice to see all of you.
I'd rather be dancing with you.
I'd rather be dancing too, always, always. And nice to see my friend Scott there in the background. He and I do some wonderful volunteer work together every summer. He's quite a leader in our community across the state.
Of the camp? You're part of the camp scene?
Yeah, I work with the littlest girls. It's pretty great.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't think Scott could have possibly been in your committee room all this time and not talked about camp. So I'm glad.
Oh, we've talked about camp.
Yeah. Okay, let me get focused. I'm Jill Olson. I'm the executive director of the VNAs of Vermont. So I represent home health and hospice agencies. But I also just wanted to give you a little broader perspective. I am a member of the State Workforce Development Board, so appointed by the governor to that board. I'm also on the subcommittee, the AHS, which is now a subcommittee actually of that board, that helped develop the Agency of Human Services strategic plan for workforce that is the basis of the healthcare sections of this bill. And then I am the facilitator for the Healthcare Coalition of Trade Associations. We formed at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've kind of stuck together even as we've moved beyond expanded. They're still doing pandemic, but we've expanded to other issues as well. And then I'm a member of the Long-Term Care Crisis Coalition, which is a group that's also come together on various issues related to our long-term care services in Vermont. So, and from all those hats, I'm a strong supporter, and we are strong supporters of those healthcare workforce sections of the bill. So I'm really mostly, I don't have Maureen's technical expertise. I think that she's a critical person in this effort, but I'm here to just really emphasize the importance of getting this language over the finish line. This was all coming out of that AHS strategic plan, which had a very broad group of stakeholders working on it. The main things we're trying to do are we really need to increase the supply of our healthcare workforce, both by building our own within Vermont and then also attracting people from out of state. So it's really two sets of ideas. And especially on that pipeline, on really trying to get people who have maybe just entered into healthcare or social service type work, like being personal care attendants, for example, which doesn't actually require any particular training or external certification, moving people like that into, say, an LNA or LPN program. And those are people who don't need loan repayment. They really need support to pay for the tuition. They're not going to borrow money to make it through those programs. They're going to need support. So we're looking at a combination here of loan repayments and of support for that workforce. Also increasing nurse faculty, and then the preceptor element, which is really training in the field, which is a critical part of getting enough people through our nursing schools. As I'm sure you've heard, one of the challenges that we face in the nursing workforce is that we literally cannot train as many nurses as are interested in being nurses. Cannot train them all. And we have faculty issues, we have clinical placement issues. There's just a constellation of concerns. So we're really, I just want to urge you to get this over the finish line, especially since most of these provisions are funded in the budget. So that the House did take care of the money side of most of this work. I have one very specific request of you, a minor language change. In section 22, which is the employer nursing pipeline and apprenticeship program section, for reasons I cannot explain, home health agencies are not listed there. And we're, our entire workforce is essentially the targeted professions, PCAs, LNAs, LPNs, and RNs. So I'm not sure, we're listed in other places. We would technically fall under other providers, but we often get forgotten in the nurse education world. It's definitely remains a sort of hospital-centric universe, and so it's important to us to be listed specifically. So that's my one specific request, is just to get the word home health agency in that section.
The words you want is home health agencies?
Yes, home health agencies. Yep.
And where,
It's right at the
In A.
section A.
Section A.
yeah, I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little funny, like designated and specialized service agencies don't hire actually a particularly large number of PCAs, LNAs, or LPNs, and so they're listed, but we're not. I think it's just an oversight.
Why? Yeah, I mean, aren't you considered though? It says grants to healthcare employers. You're a healthcare employer.
Yep, we are, but what I'm saying is that we get forgotten, and so I want us to be remembered by being listed explicitly. That's why I'm asking. Yeah, if I were a hospital, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much, but people don't always remember the role we play in the system.
That is good.
And that's
They're clearly, the sections that you're concerned with are clearly identified in the headers. You don't have to tell us the number. They all have the word health somewhere in that, right?
yeah, it's pretty much section 19 on.
So do you have, I know you've mentioned a couple of them, but do you have any super important priorities within a rather large section of
Not really. It's really, we really need it all. We have such a crisis on our hands, and there's no one solution. And so we really tried to identify everything we could think of that would help us with the problem. I will say that I do think it's important that we add in the, there's I've now lost the section, but there's a section on a data hub. And this is something we really need to make. Looking at healthcare workforce, we need an infrastructure for that. So what's, I've been around now a while, and what happens is every few years, we sort of reinvent the wheel on looking at the healthcare workforce and do a study and write a report. And we really need that to be baked into the work that we do all the time in state government, so that we have a way to measure how we're doing, and we have a way to examine and create new proposals to solve the problems that we have. And so one of the things that's just especially hard there's just not really a way to measure how our progress toward increasing our supply increasing our nurses, and also especially our personal care attendants. They don't even have really there's not really like a Department of Labor classification for them. And so there's some work to be done to figure out how we even understand that group or target at them in particular. So we need some of the infrastructure pieces that are in the bill.
So it seems like most of these sections on healthcare came from the healthcare committee to the commerce committee. Were you involved personally, or is there a lead person of this stakeholder group you talked about?
Yeah.
Carried the water, so to speak, from an advocacy perspective to the committee?
Yep. So Laura Pelosi, I would say, is the person who is carrying the water from the healthcare provider side, and Ina Backus, the director of healthcare reform, from the administration side, in terms of the details in the bill. But the healthcare committee was actually also responding to the AHS strategic plan and Ina Backus was the author of that. So that was a whole stakeholder process that preceded the legislative session so that we'd be ready with proposals coming in. So it's been quite a bit of process to get to this point.
And was there any, excuse me, Senator, was there any concern or discussion about whether this plethora of programs are base builders? Like, they seem to be one-time funding in a lot of charts we see, but they all look like they're ongoing programs.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, we sort of have to, we've continued to get, say, the nurse scholarship monies. We've been getting those appropriated annually. It's not the first time we've seen those. So yes, there is a combination of, there is some stuff that is one time that is more ongoing. I think the difference, well, maybe not the difference, but I think why that's reasonable is that if there are some things that once you commit, you can't uncommit, right? Like, so if a Medicaid increase, for example, right? Once you've committed to the increase, it carries, those dollars carry forward forever. But on a scholarship program, if it were to stop abruptly, there just simply would be no money for the new crop of applicants. And so I don't think while I'd rather see something more structural over time, I don't think I don't think we should allow that to be, to get in our way of making it happen now. A group of people this year will be able to get access to those dollars, and we need that.
Well, maybe it's more the concern of the appropriators, but every chart we've seen has all of these programs being one-time general fund or one-time ARPA. And then they talk about this alligator graph that if we continue these programs, revenues are not going to be. So, I just wonder, are we raising expectations, and then the next legislature is going to be the evil empire cutting things. But, yes.
So, Jill, we've heard this before, even though nursing is one of the most clearly articulated ladders of certifications and advancement. I mean, it's really a model for, I think, professional growth in the whole workforce development system. I think it's fabulous. However, we have just heard you call out for, and we've heard from other testimony, that there needs to be a head to this octopus of opportunity, from marketing and CTE to data collection. The nursing board isn't that one head. The Department of Health isn't that one head. And I think we need to figure out who is the final go-to person for every aspect of nursing profession. And I just heard you call that out again with the data collection piece. So that's, to me, a big question here with all of this. Even though you have the best defined ladder for success I know of in workforce, we still don't have one go-to crowd who knows everything that's happening in nursing and who can coordinate it all.
I think that what I would say is that this newly formed subcommittee of the State Workforce Development Board is our attempt to have an ongoing process. I think that was something we identified, and that would also cover not just nursing, but other aspects of the healthcare workforce. And it includes the schools, it includes the healthcare employers, it includes state government, it includes the Department of Labor, so AHS, Department of Labor. So that was our attempt. So that group is already formed and meeting. I also
our State Workforce Development Board. Right.
So Jill,
so this is now a subcommittee of that State Workforce Development Board. That's new. That's a restructuring of that board to create a healthcare subcommittee. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jill has a hard stop 3 minutes ago. So
we'll
let you go.
I appreciate it. Let me just remind you, we've got to do this. The situation on the ground is really scary out there, and the level of stress among our healthcare workforce is unbelievable, as I'm sure you've heard. So we just have got to support the system. I talk to leaders every day who are just trying to figure out how to take care of the next patient in front of them. And so I just really urge you to do everything you can.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you jumping me ahead of the line. And thank you to the other witnesses for allowing that to happen.
You owe Fred County.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Fred, thank you so much for being patient. I know you were on like 45 minutes ago, I think. But why don't you introduce yourself or reintroduce yourself? Welcome, and tell us your interesting 703 section and page number, if you can help us with that.
Sure. And joining me, Fred Kenny, Executive Director of the Addison County Economic Development Corporation, and also currently serving as President of the RDCs of Vermont. And joining me, I hope you don't mind, that Adam Grenold from BDCC is also joining me. Immediate past president.
And past president of the State Workforce Development Board.
I think he still is.
Are you still?
Wow.
Good.
I'm surprised you don't have gray hair.
Well, it's falling out instead.
It's just no hair, right?
And that's because Adam has delegated so successfully to people like Jill Olson,
Exactly.
right?
Well, I appreciate you giving us time today, and no problem pushing us till now. That was a very important topic to cover, and probably, one of the most important parts of H703. And I'm not going to comment on a specific part of H703. We have a general recommendation. So I'll just go through that, and then we'll go to questions. So, when this all started in the House and now with you folks, the RDCs are recommending an approach to the labor force issues that we're seeing that is multifaceted and multi-level. When we say multifaceted, we mean, all the stuff you've heard. We need to increase our labor force. We need to provide specialized and focused engagement to bring existing populations back into the workforce and provide support services for certain populations. And then, like this bill does a lot of, is provide training and education, funding, and flexibility. When we say multi-level, we believe there's a need for a system that integrates across public and private labor force stakeholders to improve alignment, collaboration, insights, and strategies on the state and statewide and regional levels. What came out of the House, we really appreciate the proposed investments in H703. This morning you talked about the meat cutter section. That's very important. We have several entities in our region that could benefit from that. The nursing issue that you just discussed, a lot of good investments in there. But in my perspective, and I think a lot of my colleagues believe this, that the bill is kind of one-dimensional. It makes a lot of investments in programs and services in a lot of different places. But it doesn't create a system or network that will ensure that connection building, improve alignments and collaboration, and sharing information up from the regions and down from the state. There's no network. There's currently no network, and there's nothing proposed in the bill that would, build a network to help gain insights regionally, which the RDCs can do, and help develop strategies at the state level and then implement them on the regional level. The current draft kind of further exasperates what's been happening in workforce development, where we're operating in silos, with no connecting tissue between all the stakeholders. We believe that there needs to be someone in each region that gets up every morning and they're dedicated to workforce development, dedicated to the labor force issues. They would be making connections and ensuring collaboration horizontally, among all the regional stakeholders, whether it's service providers, the Department of Labor, employers, and then vertically between the regions and the state, making sure that information, data, and everything goes up to the state, and that when policies and programs are implemented, that comes back down to the regions, that gets implemented regionally.
So can I interrupt for a second? I couldn't agree more with everything you said. This whole area of workforce development frustrates me. All the boards and the size of the boards and the subcommittees. Isn't that what Adam is in charge of now? It almost sounds like you're asking for 5 new people to go ahead and coordinate the existing people. So I'm just, and I guess the other question I have, has any state cracked this nut? Is there a state that has a Department of Workforce Development? Everything's concentrated in one place where there is a head and filters down. I mean, I glaze over when I hear the word workforce development because I'm so jaded about so many silos and so many programs. And it seems like there's more people out there working to help the people who need work than there are people who need work.
Or people working right now.
I'll let Adam comment on the workforce board, but that's a state level, a statewide group. And I think the RDCs are uniquely situated, positioned, and suited to take on workforce development, not just workforce development, because to me that means the training and the programs that are available and connections with employers, but the labor force issues, which means trying to bring more people into the state. But we're already engaged in economic development at the region. And we would propose a person in each region, so 12 people, that all they concentrate on is workforce development, labor force issues. But you leverage the existing asset, the RDCs in Vermont, with additional resources, of course, to provide a backbone for labor force collaboration in each region, so that if the state or the board has a policy or something they're trying to implement, there are people in each region to implement it, and in each region to make those connections between the employee, demand side, the employers, and the supply side, the potential employees, trying to get them, make sure they, you were just talking about some of the nursing programs and how does somebody know about all the different programs? Well, in our proposal, we would propose that this person is that coordinator for the region, and regardless of what door they go into, whether it's Department of Labor or ours or the chamber, there's connections made so that everybody gets the same answer, has the same information, and gets funneled to the same place to get information about programs for potential employees on programs and grants and scholarships. And also, we already have connections with all our employers, so we would also be working on the demand side to bring them into the fold, to create apprenticeships, to participate in the Vermont talent pipeline, and other programs. So I'll leave it at that for now and let Adam answer the question about the board.
Sure, thank you. So yes, my name is Adam Grinold, Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and here today as an RDC participant. I also serve as the chair of the statewide Workforce Development Board, and also am on the State College System Board of Trustees. So I do bring those two perspectives to today's discussion, but am speaking as the executive director of the BDCC. But to the question about, or the frustration of, are there the same number of people working in workforce development as people seeking jobs? I think the important distinction here is that we are not proposing to do that at all. We instead work to build the local system. So where I see from my perspective that we have failed as a state and as a region is that we don't have those coordinated efforts that are local. Workforce development is local. It cannot be statewide. You have to understand your local community. You have to understand your employers, your school system, all of the different things that can go into that. And what we lack is the coordination of that locally. So when the WIBs disappeared, it was a real, in some areas we're just taking a check and not doing much. But what we've seen is a rebuilding of local initiatives and efforts across the state. So here in our region, we've been extremely successful in bringing employer and educators together, but also keeping them apart at the right point. When you bring them together, they then can speak a similar language. What we found is just a lack of communication previously. So by intentionally trying to be a coordinator instead of an individual navigator, what we have found is great success in bringing all those folks together, getting alignment in our goals, in the allocation of resources. The challenge for us is we as an organization have had to go out and fundraise each and every year to be able to continue to support that capacity. So what we know is that when you invest in that capacity in a local region, you can coordinate all of the different participants in a much more effective way. RDCs work under a public-private partnership. We're under a performance-based grant already. And so as Fred has shared, I think it's a great opportunity to invest in that capacity through a very nimble system that can be adapted one year to the next. So yes, a big proponent of this. Also looking forward to it being replicated across the state in a way that, as Fred mentioned, is up and down. So we also gain all of the knowledge that's happening in every region, but every region can share up to a centralized state initiative.
And I just want to, there is in section 5, the House has proposed to partially fund what the Department of Labor requested for regional outreach. And we don't see this in competition with that. We believe this would be in addition to that. Having 3 Department of Labor folks in 3 regions is not going to get the result that we're talking about. But having a staff person in each RDC that concentrates on workforce development and labor force issues would complement that.
So you don't currently have somebody in the RDCs that does that?
No, it's not a primary function of the RDCs. Like Adam said, some of us have a person working on some workforce development issues. I started the Addison County Workforce Alliance here in Addison County, which basically does what I'm talking about. It sets the table to bring the CTE, us, the chamber, the service providers, Department of Labor and others to the table to work on workforce issues. But that's, that's taking me away from my economic development primary function that is in our, that's the reason we exist and why HRDC was started and part of the grant that we get from the state. But, this will be a full-time job working on workforce development. We need to have a staff person in each RDC that can concentrate on this. And that's what the proposal is for, is to provide the capacity to add a workforce coordinator for each region at the RDCs.
So the ask is pretty substantial, 4 million over 3 years in your.
Yeah, it is over 3 years.
Yeah, right. No, but that's the way our approach likes it, to see what the cost is over time.
It's about 1.3 million a year.
Yeah.
Okay,
See this?
yeah, I've seen that, yeah. Well, thank
And
you.
that, I just want to point out that proposal, was based on the House passed bill. So, it lays out what each RDC would work on that would coordinate with what is currently proposed in H703. Obviously, if you change that bill and there are functions that need to happen regionally and locally, that, we can change that. It's just a proposed scope of work. And that can be changed. But really what it does is lays out what could happen regionally to really develop a network and a system to collaborate on workforce development in each region. Sorry.
So this would be the RDC complement to the work, the subcommittee that the State Workforce Development Board has created. Because Jill just sort of talked about, you know, when I was talking about the frustration with nursing, that there isn't any one go-to person that knows everything about nursing, from the inflow to the pipeline to the outflow of product and the data collection. You're looking at this as sort of the professional, full-time anchored complement in the RDCs to what that subcommittee is, basically on a volunteer basis for the State Workforce Development Board.
I think one of the things, the important thing to understand when considering the workforce network, I'm not going to call it a system, is that every service provider is funded from a specific source and can then only service the folks in which they receive the funding for. And so it is no one's job to have an oversight of the entire system within a region. And this role would really provide that connectivity. You know, I think Senator Clarkson, you referred to it as the head of the octopus, is really just knowing where all the different parts are and trying to bring everybody together. And to date, that's missing. So everyone is just funded, focused on the delivery of their service instead of focusing on the system as a whole.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here, Fred. I want to, it's relevant to this committee, so I want to switch gears for a second. We're dealing with an amendment in finance that deals with TIFs. And I wanted to ask if you had any history on that. And this committee does have to take a vote on to whether to go along with this amendment. So I don't know how much has been sent to you already on this, but Senator Pearson, we are doing pretty much the same pilot program for many TIFs that we passed out of this committee unanimously for 2 years now. This year we passed it again. It's a little smaller. I think it's down to 4 projects, but somehow something got into this bill. We never took any testimony on it. I don't know how it got into this bill. And it deals with the location criteria for the regular TIF program, and it makes one word change. There's 3 criteria. I'm looking it up online. You probably know this stuff cold, but it either has to be dense, compact, or near an industrial area. It presently says 2 out of the 3, and apparently that was changed in 2017 from 1 out of the 3 to 2 out of the 3. And now Senator Pearson, because we had taken no testimony here, couldn't really defend it. We didn't have any testimony in finance. He just wants to go back to the status quo and leave it at 1 out of 3 for now. So I'm wondering if you have any recollection of this change. Smiling, it sounds like you do.
Well,
and whether it really means anything. I mean, I'm inclined just to go along with it. We never took any testimony here on it. I don't know how it got in our bill.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have to go to my presiding tutorial.
Okay.
Because we're starting on the floor.
Could you leave your vote on this?
What?
Could you leave your vote on this, whether we're going to go along with this amendment? Bills being voted out.
What bills being voted out?
The economic development bill is coming out of finance.
Oh, right. Oh my God, we're on.
This is just on a technical correction.
On the TIF.
So the whole bill is coming out, correct?
We hope. Yes.
That intact is what we're
Today.
hoping.
Yes.
Correct.
And it's going to go. Then it's going to go to approach.
Then it goes to
Oh,
approach.
okay. So we're just focusing on amendment now, not any other.
It's just a really technical amendment that I just want to get
Yeah,
by, because we didn't take any testimony on it. So I just leave the statute the way it is. I don't even know how it appeared in our bill, but it changes. You have to meet from 2 criteria to 1 criteria. Existing, you only have to meet. No, existing, you have to meet 2. Yeah, you just leave it where it is.
I don't recall that here.
Fine.
I leave it, so the amendment is to leave it at 2.
Okay, so
Correct. I vote to,
We leave it at 1.
no, we changed it.
we changed it inadvertently to 1.
And I want to just say, fine, we didn't know what we were doing, we never heard about it. And so, for the sake of the bill, I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
Okay, are we taking a vote?
seeing nods, is that okay?
Yes.
That's fine. That's what.
I don't think our intent was to change.
We never heard anything about it, I didn't even know it was in the bill.
I agree.
JFO found it, I don't know.
Okay.
Do you have any comments now that we voted?
You're taxing my memory about the changes back then. First, I thank you for all your work on H-159. It's a lot of great economic development provisions in there, and I understand you have a long way to go through appropriations to get that done. But I vaguely remember the changes to, so the current law for regular TIFs is you only have to meet one of the location criteria, correct? And you think your inadvertent amendment made it that you had to, or is it the other way around?
Current laws, you have to be 2.
Yeah.
Without knowing it, there was the very last line of our bill crosses out 2 and changes it to 1. JFO brought that to our attention, and we were just fumbling. I basically said, maybe it has, I don't know what it had to do with, because I never even saw it. It's really hard to find.
And that's not just for the project-based TIFs, right? It's for the regular TIF
I
program.
think it's for the big TIF program.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember back when the location criteria was being debated and, inserted into the law, and there were, the entities behind ensuring that the location criteria in the bill were the smart growth entities that didn't want TIFs to be in green fields, which we all agreed to at the time. We didn't want that either, but we were trying to make sure that municipalities would be able, that wasn't going to stop municipalities from the ability to use the program. So yeah, and I don't remember any.
We flagged the issue now, so next year we will look at this issue and see if there's a problem. I don't know. I mean, it may have been one of these things where I asked David to put together every bill that was out there. Somebody had a bill on this, and David never talked to us about it. We never talked about it. So that's what happened. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fred.
All right. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
We're good? Okay.